So, one more brief philosophical lecture for now. It is about does God exist because of the trans-world identity of a causal trade-in between Meinongian or impossible worlds, which is kind of one of my hypotheses as to how God could potentially exist. Philosophical hypotheses, rather. Now, see, there's a concept known as a causal trade-in, and what a causal trade-in is the bartering or the swapping between properties abstracta, tokens, tropes, etc., which constitute the voluminous aggregates found within each subnodes of the possible worlds indices or matrices. Now, the question is this is one of the favorite philosophical theological questions I have about God's existence is what is if God exists in another possible world, but not necessarily this world. But now, if God was traded, say, through an interactive state somehow, whether it was quantum disentanglement or quantum interactionism, some kind of bizarre antimatter, matter, graviton, anion, baryon, omega, alpha, it all kind of knits itself together and weaves itself together into this notionality that the truth about what is truth is that truth seems to be based on, to many, at least from a non-solipsistic kind of bird's eye view, would be that the points that constitute the matter and antimatter found within a tautological A equals B and B equals V relations that exist as Boolean statements. That is what many seem to conflate truth is of Boolean or absolutism of certainty about a particular tautological statement. And I think that ultimately the notion of why anything takes on the truth makers of truth and kind of recapitulates it or instantiates it, universal versus subjectivist or relativistic in subtransiation and instantiation are very much metaphysically profound concepts that I derive a lot of hedonistic value from. So I think that ultimately, if philosophy is to evolve, it's to include non-tautological models of truth as well, and non-indiscernible models of truth, such as, one truth may not be like another truth, even at the molecular, atomistic, logical, propositional level, yet it still possesses, say, objective morality, axiology, or a theological realist value. Then it's still in some sense a synonymous truth, or an equitably and equinumerous truth. So I think that if God was ultimately traded causally from a Meinongian or modal ontologized impossible world, it becomes a question why impossible worlds themselves exist rather than exist, and why does God non-existently exist in an impossible world? Well, that I don't really know, I confess. It's still a matter of me germinated in the future about it. But I shall say that the possibilism behind the potentiality of non-existent existence or existent non-existence manifested as an acausal trade-in requires the ontological necessity of transworld identity as a pan-actualist or pan-modal realist truth, ontological law of sorts. Now, ultimately, if we look at the different parts of God topologically and how these parts are traded and as an assemblage like furniture, for example, or architecture, then it becomes the question ultimately of why such parts ultimately molecularly came together to compose God in an abiogenesis-like manner. Now, I think that this hypothesis may have some ultimate empirical value if you cherish and value, you know, questions as to, non quote unquote traditionalist, notions of God's existence. So ultimately, I want to thank you so much and have a blessed day. Oh, sorry. To conclude, I would say that ultimately I stand by my hypothesis because I believe it Meinongian epistemologically addresses the transworld identity parts to whole relations that foundationally comprise the consciousness that God may take on as he or she. Now, I use she and many don't, but I use she because I include the Hindu and henotheistic and polytheistic and indigenous notions of God, not simply the Christian God or Judeo-Christian or Islamic. Now, anyways, thank you so much for being so sensitive in this nature. If you do so inclined to, please let me know about somehow in a follow-up video if you can about the nature of transworld identity and the causal trade in between properties and universals that constitute a God's ontological maximism. Thank you so much.